This is Dr. Lisa Marie Bobby, and you're listening to the Love, Happiness, and Success podcast. Spirituality can add depth and purpose to life, but the belief systems we're raised in don't always feel right for us as adults, and not all religious experiences are positive. Some are even traumatic. Today, we're talking about how you can cultivate healthy spirituality, heal from toxic religious experiences, and build a belief system that is in alignment with your true values.
Viento que viene de la montaña, viento, tráenos la claridad.
This beautiful, haunting music that we're listening to together right now is from the band Danet, and the song is called Cuatro Vientos. I am not fully sure what they are singing, but I can read you a little bit about this band and you'll get the idea. And this is from their Bandcamp page, which is rkjvk.bandcamp.com. rkjvk.bandcamp.com. And this is a Swiss singer-songwriter whose music is an expression of gratitude for life and nature. Cuatro Vientos speaks of four winds that come from the mountains, the ocean, the desert, and the forest, each one bringing its unique quality. What a lovely concept to launch our discussion of healthy spirituality today. For many, spirituality can be a source of comfort, connection, and community. It can help us make sense of the world, find peace and acceptance after loss, and feel connected to something that's bigger than us. But for some, religion is fraught, and understandably so. Even thinking about spirituality can bring up painful memories and harmful messages that may be difficult to completely shake off, even if you really, really want to. You know, it's true that some people even have trauma from their experiences with religion, and the residue of that trauma can affect them for the rest of their lives and make it difficult to cultivate a healthy belief system. So every one of us has this never-ending quest to make meaning of our experiences. A spiritual practice or religious belief system can be a huge part of how we do that. But if we've had painful or traumatic experiences with religion, it can be difficult to have a relationship with spirituality that feels healthy and authentic for you. Furthermore, another barrier is that many of us, I would say most of us, first learn about religion or belief systems as children when we are told what to believe, essentially. We're handed a playbook around, here's what we believe, that sometimes isn't congruent for us as adults. So there's a lot here. If you are exploring your own spirituality or unpacking some bad experiences tied to religion, this episode of the podcast is for you. Even if you are a diehard atheist or an agnostic, I think you'll find a lot of useful information here. So we're going to be talking about a lot, how you can develop your own intrinsic and authentic feeling belief system in a healthy way. Also, how you can recover from negative religious experiences and decide for yourself if you'd like to engage with a spiritual practice going forward. So my guest today is someone who knows a lot about this topic, my colleague, Jennifer. Jennifer is a marriage and family therapist on our team here at Growing Self, and she is also an ordained pastor who has a lot of experience in kind of the space in between more conventional psychotherapy, couples and family therapy, but also spiritual counseling. And so I thought that she was the perfect person to come and speak with us because she's helped so many people explore big life questions like, who am I? What do I believe? And today she's here to share her wisdom and guidance with you. So thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Lisa, for having me today.
Yeah, this is great. And, such an important topic. I mean, even if I was just, thinking about our little introduction, for many people, spirituality is just such an important part of life. And as I was preparing, for this show, I was kind of doing a little bit more reflecting on that. And I mean, for the history of humanity, really. I mean, indigenous cultures, shamanistic cultures. I mean, in every sort of stage and form of the human experience, there have been belief systems and practices that, humans are trying to stay connected to the divine somehow. And, I know that we also understand now that having a healthy belief system can be really an important part of just overall wellness, like mental, emotional, relational wellness. And so this is a huge question. And I don't know if this is a fair one to spring on you, like right off the bat for our conversation. But I mean, do you have any thoughts or opinions about why spirituality seems like it's such an important thing for humans in general?
That is a great question.
Okay, go.
I think it is very important because often as humans, we want to think that there is something bigger than ourselves, that there is a grander purpose or plan to why we're here on earth, and to feel like we connect to a higher being or nature, because spirituality can be so many different things of connecting. It gives us purpose. And a life without purpose can often feel like we're just floating along. So I just think it's that human nature of wanting to connect with something grander than ourselves, bigger than ourselves.
That makes a lot of sense. Like without having that sense of connection or being able to make meaning or purpose. And I also just want to say clearly that people can and do find meaning in life and find purpose and find connection in other ways, which are completely valid and very appropriate. But again, there's this human thing about where we tend to seek that connection with some kind of divine. And thank you for talking about why that might be.
Well, and that yes, and sometimes we want to know where we come from. Like, is there stuff before? Is there stuff after? And all of that can be interconnected with that search for meaning.
Definitely, yeah. And I'm feeling that I should probably say before we go further here that just for our listeners so that they understand, I think also the intention of our conversation today is to be very, very inclusive. And while we will be talking about spirituality, hopefully we will be talking about it in all of its different forms, and certainly not advocating any form of belief system over the other. And also, making space for the absence of a belief system and how people can find, that meaning and purpose in other ways or forms. Again, that's completely fine too. So just so our listeners know, because I think it's important. I think some people, this is terrible. And it goes back into that other part of, what we're going to be talking about today is like, it can sometimes feel like belief systems are pushed on them, or if they know that somebody is spiritual or a person who practices a certain faith, there's this almost like anticipatory defensiveness about like, I don't know, because, they may be like, feel judged, I guess, or
I think that's
pressured or
great.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, that feeling of being judged, like, oh, I can't talk to them about anything because they have this belief system and I believe something different. And so many people, when they hold a certain title or a certain form of belief, they don't know how to move forward, and because they've been shamed. So if we're going to go back to the childhood trauma of some of what spirituality or religion can bring to people, is they've been shamed, they've been guilted that if they don't believe a certain way or act a certain way, then there's going to be these huge repercussions to their lives, or they also might have been shunned depending on that religious background of what it may be. And so many times people have been hurt from that. And so if someone's carrying along a title that corresponds to place that they remember from their childhood or from growing up or even in their 20s or 30s, but it can also bring back those memories or make them feel that they're going to be judged or looked at differently, or that there's prejudice against them for feeling differently than others.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good point that even it can be fraught. I mean, even interacting with another person that, you sense may be different for you in that regard and understandably so. So one of the things that I think it would be helpful to talk about just to kind of set the stage for everything else, I mean, it seems to me that for many, if not most people, depending on the family you come from, but you are almost indoctrinated into a belief system or a faith system of one kind or another, starting as a very young child. I know in the Christian tradition, there is Sunday school and certainly, many other faith traditions like start with early education. And your parents are teaching you this, and if you're going to church, and there's all the stuff that is reinforced. Can you say a little bit more about what you've seen as being, helpful for that system of raising kids in a faith, and also, what have you seen as a therapist that is unhelpful for people, as adults who may grow and evolve in different ways, where that early teaching isn't congruent for them. And what have you seen with that over your career?
Well, I'll start definitely with helpful, and then we'll move into some of the ramifications. But helpful, I find that a lot of people cling to what they've known from growing up because it is a safe base. It's something they can hold on to. It stores in it different values or morals or applications to that child growing up. Something to help them understand the difference between right or wrong through stories, through the application of whatever their belief system may be. And people often hold on to it because that's what they know. A lot of times, and this is a very side note, but people often within 5 to 10 miles of where they've grown up. And it's happening a little bit more now, but you often stay to what you're rooted to and what you know. And so that often happens with religion and spirituality as well. But sometimes the things that are done in the name of religion or spirituality can actually be very harmful because as you're growing up, you're taught a certain belief that you are to act this way. And if you don't act this way, then this, like I said, this will be the ramification. When you do that, it leads to these feelings of shame and guilt, anger because you don't know how to express yourself. Because if you do something differently, then your parents are going to treat you differently or tell you that you are sinful or wrong or whatever word they might use in that context. And you bring that into adulthood. And if you haven't dealt with that, you still have these feelings of shame or guilt, and you may give into addictions. I've seen that happen quite a few times where people will drink quite a bit or take drugs to try to get over those feelings and those emotions those voices that continue to roll around in their heads from growing up. Because if I do this, then this is what's going to happen. And they're stuck somewhere in between because they don't necessarily believe the same things. They may have a different understanding of what a higher power might be or what a spiritual life is and what their connection to whether it's a greater power or believing that there is no greater power, and then riding through those different emotions. But guilt and shame, those and anger are just a few, but those are very dominant. I see with clients who have had trauma that they've experienced for the things that have been done in the name of religion. And I was even just thinking back to just some because so much trust is put into religion or the different spiritual centers that they might have attended, just how sometimes even the people within those systems have hurt some of my clients as they're going into adulthood, that they didn't feel they were comfortable enough to tell their parents what happened, whether they were shamed or whether they were hurt or abused or any of those different things. But there's a lot that can come out of.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, just to share, I'm not a practicing Catholic, nor honestly was my childhood kind of monolithically Catholic. Like we were air quote Catholic. We went to church, and I did like the early the classes and all the things. But in reality, looking back, my mom was very much more excited about like almost new age belief systems. And so like I was exposed to all kinds of things growing up. But with that exposure to Catholicism and also just the knowledge of the horrible things that have been done in that particular faith, I think largely due to this like power hierarchy that you're discussing. I mean, child abuse and just the worst things. But I think that with some of the belief systems, I think it can not anything about the belief systems themselves or the spiritual practice, but the social systems that get built around this, very hierarchical, and there's a lot of power structures, also often kind of, patriarchal, male dominated. But I think too, and again, this is sort of my experience as an observer, it can also lead to this like black and white, right and wrong thinking style that gets applied to a lot of different situations. And so if you have a power structure and also there's a right way and a wrong way, and I'm going to tell you what that is, like it's very easy to create feelings of shame, anxiety, fear, guilt, rejection, especially in children who are so vulnerable they're still like developing their little sense of self. And
right, because it doesn't give them a lot of opportunity to explore the world or to understand their place within it, because they're being told this is how it is. And if you are to believe outside of this system, this box, then you're wrong. And how hard is that for a child who's coming into their own, who sees themselves as different than where their parents are coming from? And this is coming out more and more in so many different aspects as just beautiful about the changes I see. And that 2020s, I guess you would say, is just that they're finding more of a voice. And I think it's really important for our children to be able to say, this is my preferred pronoun, or this is who I am, or whatever it may be. It's just really important to meet people where they're at. And I think that sometimes religion gets stuck, and these are the actions and the plans that we made, and this is how it is, and this is how we've been doing it for 200 years or whatever, and this is how it should go. And people get hurt not by the belief system, like you said, but often by the structure that has been imposed by whether it's religious leaders or whatever sect it may be.
Yeah. No, I get that. No, that's helpful, and it's interesting. I think what's coming up for me right now, like I'm thinking about with adolescents in particular, so like 11 to 18-year-olds and still beyond, like the work of adolescence in many ways is like trying on different identities and experimenting with who am I? And maybe, 1 year I'm going to be a jock on the basketball team, and another, and then I make some new friends, and now I'm growing out my hair and I'm dyeing it blue. And, that's what you're supposed to do as an adolescent, is like just try on almost different person suits as you figure out your way of being. And I could see how potentially for an adolescent who's growing up in a very kind of structured, clear, like, no, this is the only way to be belief system, it would kind of inhibit a lot of that development, the developmental process.
Right. Well, and I mean, as you speak about adolescence, I think about sexuality.
Yeah.
I think about
coming
into their own.
I wasn't even thinking about that.
I just sort of because it reminds me of a young man I grew up with, and I grew up in Texas in the deep South and the Bible Belt, and everything was very black and white. You do this or you do that, and from a young age, he knew that he was gay, and how he was shunned, how he was treated by people around him always broke my heart. And I think, number one, we were taught to love. We are to love others above all else. And what does that matter in the long run, like in the grand scheme of things, if he's attracted to men or to women? And just how he was treated. And I'm talking about 1990s here and late 80s. But it has always stayed with me because, like I said, the things that have been done in the name of religion can hurt so many people. And I really think of that adolescent time when you're coming into your own, you're trying to figure out who it is you like, who you don't like, who you want to be, what group you want to hang out with, what crowd, all those different things. They're so hard as so much is going on in your body during that time. And then to be told that this is only right and this is only wrong, but you feel differently. What a conundrum for a young person. And I have seen, as a result, kids not knowing what to do with all these emotions, cutting themselves or harming themselves in different ways. And I'm not saying it always goes to that extreme, but it is such a hard place to be. And especially when they don't feel there is an adult voice or other people around them they can talk to that can understand them.
Yeah, fully. Yeah. Or I mean, suicide, because
Yes.
because when you think about it, I mean, a kid in that situation only has two choices. Either it can turn into shame and self-hatred, right? About being like internalizing all that, or a complete rejection of the faith, the community, and also, some of the relationships. Like, it is a terrible bind, because to choose themselves means I have to reject everything and everybody else that I love, right? And like, 13, I mean, like, who can do that at that tender age? So it's really so hard. Yeah.
And they just want to be accepted at that age. They just want somebody
Yeah.
to hold them, to be with them, whatever that means, it looks like. So yes. So
yeah. I mean, certainly, we've been talking about times and situations where that kind of early, exposure or encouragement around a certain belief system can be, have unintended consequences, I think, for kids and adolescents in terms of their development, in terms of their self-esteem. But I'm also wondering if you could speak to, a situation where maybe someone did not have patently toxic or harmful experiences. Maybe they grew up in an environment and they did the things and went to the services and everything was fine. And only until their later life, I mean, I'm imagining somebody in their later 20s or their 30s began to feel, is that really what I believe or think? I mean, have you ever seen it where somebody kind of trucks along and sort of takes what they were given until maybe a point in later life where they, I don't know, feel the need to explore on their own for themselves. And, maybe they come back to that belief system that they were originally, raised in, but maybe sometimes not. I mean, I'm sure you've walked with people who are in that crisis of like, who am I? What do I believe? And maybe do choose to go in a different direction.
well, one of the unique jobs I have had in my life is I worked as a young adults pastor. So I worked with a lot of 20 somethings and early 30 somethings who were trying to figure it out on their own, away from their parental systems, trying to figure out, what does it look like to have faith? What does it look like to be spiritual? And this search for who they are in the midst of this is so difficult. And some of them were like, you know what? I like this reassurance that I'm not alone. I like that there's somebody who is walking alongside of me and I am never alone in this world. But there were others who are like, that doesn't make a lot of sense. I am taught in science, or I'm taught in these different forms that, no, how could that possibly be? And they're starting to have a different belief system. Or they're like, I really feel connected to myself and find calm and peace through meditation or through nature or other things. And maybe I don't believe in a higher power or whatever you want to call that being, but I believe that I can feel peace and calm. And so they decide that that is their form of spirituality and that it's not what their parents told them or how it was. And so I think it's part of the coming to your own and figuring it out and maybe looking at different religions, what they teach. I have to say, when I was in grad school, it was the most eye opening experience of my life. Like I said, coming from the Deep South and Bible Belt, I was taught to just look at one religion, and this is the one and only religion. But when I got to discover Buddhism, Hinduism, um, Muslim, and the Quran, and the beauty in so many other world religions, my eyes were completely opened to there's more than I was taught growing up. And it was just such a beautiful awakening for me to discover what my own faith was, what that looks like. Um, and and I've seen that in a lot of my clients. And just this understanding of our parents did the best they could with what they knew, and remembering that, and that there are the other harmful sides but I'm not talking about that at this point, but that it's okay to explore. It's okay to figure out what is best for who you are, because your brain isn't fully developed until your late 20s, anyways. You don't fully know who you are or what you want, and you develop that that late 20s or late 30s, even 40s for some, into the 50s and 60s for some of the clients that I have. We're constantly evolving. And I think it's just important that you give yourself the opportunity to seek it out. And if something doesn't feel like it correlates to who you are, then research, find what that fit is. What makes you feel connected, grounded is a word I often use, and find that connection piece.
Mhm.
It is a journey.
That's awesome. Yeah, oh, definitely a journey. Well, and that actually kind of brings us to one of my other questions, I'd had for you, which is what are some of the strategies or advice that you could give for somebody who's in that, or maybe even just like wanting to explore or sort of figure this out for themselves. And I think I just heard a really big and important one, which is giving yourself permission to explore. Read some different books, check out some different services or not services, I mean, just expose yourself to different ideas, different ways of thinking, and just like give yourself time and space to almost like just try on different ideas and see what feels right for you. Is that what I'm hearing?
That is exactly what I'm saying. And with this technology age, we have the opportunity to explore so much more in such an easy way, from whether it was on some sort of social media or what have you. There's so many places just to get a broader understanding of what it is you believe, and finding other people who believe similar to you, because you're not alone in this. And I think that's important, that we're all in a search to try to understand who we are, where we come from, where we want to go. And it all looks different. Everybody's journey.
Yeah. Well, and I think, I mean, I don't know if you've had this experience, but like when I think of people that I've known or have worked with that want to do this work, one of the biggest obstacles I have sometimes found is particularly for people who were raised in very kind of specific and almost dominant, faith experiences have just developed this cognitive style of wanting to figure out what is true. Like there is a truth and it is knowable. And so then the experimentation sort of turns into, I need to find out what the actual truth is, because maybe the truth that I was raised in isn't the truth. There is a different truth. And I think what I have kind of struggled with in some ways as a counselor, and like what I think has blown some people's minds, is that what if there is not a truth? Like what if there are infinite things that are all simultaneously true all at the same time? And like that idea, they're like, what, it can be a real obstacle. But I think I just wanted to say that out loud because, if you're sort of swapping one belief system for then another, this is true, it can create like a lot of anxiety. And also like, I don't know, sort of make you feel like you have to have it figured out. And I don't know that that is actually a reasonable expectation of spirituality. I don't know. Maybe you feel differently, but
I agree. I don't think you ever really know, because I think in our different chapters of our life, it looks different. And I think it's different and we hold it differently, whether we're closer to trying to figure that out or we push it aside because there are other things that are more dominant in our life at that time. But it's a journey. And I think it's really important to go back to. It's a journey. It doesn't always look the same. And earlier you were talking about sort of the black and white thinking. And oftentimes it goes to that. But what I hear from you, from what you're saying, Lisa, is that there's gray. And one of the things I teach my clients all the time is as they're trying to figure out what's right, what's wrong. And I'm like, what if there is no right or wrong? And what if there is somewhere in the middle? Because what one person sees is right and another person might see as wrong. And you're always constantly, if you're always measuring yourself against other people or what other people think or believe, you're constantly going to feel disappointed. Or a lot of different words can be put in there, or anxious, or what have you. And so it's just that acceptance of you, yourself, your journey, where you're going, and that it's not always going to look the same. Just I talk the same about personality, and that personality changes over time too, and looks differently in different chapters of our life and where life has taken us. But it's very true about our spiritual journey too. As we learn more, as grow and have more wisdom, as life circumstances, how we've reacted to those. There's so many things that perpetuates our belief system and where we come from. But is there right and wrong? I think there's gray. And I don't think it's one way or the other. And I think everybody has to come to their own of what that looks like for them. But it goes back to that permission to explore and to figure out what is right for them and not what they've been told is what they should think. You can believe that, and that's great and that's wonderful, but you also can explore and figure out if there are other pieces that you believe need to be part of it, or there's a different path that you have in your life.
No, definitely. And the phrase that's coming to my mind right now is this idea of like spiritual growth, and that it is a journey. We are always constantly evolving. And really, I mean, maybe if you do this exploration and make a full circle and kind of come back to a belief system that you inherited it, even if you do that, like at that point, it will be authentically yours, like as opposed to just, feeling like you're going through the motions, like you will have really engaged with it and be like, yes, this is what I want to do as an adult who is now giving consent and like making a choice to participate in it, as opposed to just like what we do. So, okay. I also want to make sure, though, that we talk about another just facet of this to get your thoughts. So, say we also have a listener with us today who is really has been traumatized by religion, by experiences with humans kind of in the name of religion, or exposed to things that felt very toxic from them, and would like to recover, because what we also didn't talk about is also the fact that even as an adult, if you want to make changes or sort of pull away, I mean, it is not uncommon at all for this ostracism, a rejection of a community, like they're like away with you, right? Which can be very traumatizing and also, show up in so many ways. So this is a big topic, and I do not expect you to like cover this fully in the next few minutes. But do you have any words of advice or guidance about where someone would even begin to heal from this kind of trauma? Because it's a different kind of trauma, right?
It really is, because it brings about a lot of shame often, and that you can't talk with others, because if you have family members who are still part of that religion, that sect, whatever it may be, there is the fear of the repercussions of what might happen. But I would have to say for them, I think it's really important to find somebody they can talk to. It's very helpful, whether that's a counselor or a therapist or a life coach even. But starting to understand how it relates in their life, and how is it affecting you today. So just sort of understand the origin a little bit is a good place to start. But then it's changing that narrative within you. Like, what are you doing? What can you do to not let it be a dominant voice in your life anymore? That's where some of the real work begins, and that's where that having that healthcare professional can be very beneficial. But it is where you start to explore what voices, what stories do you want dominant in your head? What is it that you want to be able to move forward? What is it that you need, not want, to be able to move forward in a healthy way? What is it that you need to feel safe again? And starting to add those things into your life, starting to figure out what that is, because oftentimes when we have been in such a traumatic experience, we don't feel safe anymore. We don't feel safe maybe with those we loved, with religion itself, with so many pieces of ourselves, because we can't believe we were put in such a situation or what have you, or that it's still affecting me today as an adult. But it goes back to making that peace with yourself and then working through the trauma of what happened.
Yeah, no, totally. First of all, find a trustworthy partner to be able to do this important work. And then again, there's a process, there is a journey of healing with a goal of, I mean, just what you like feeling safe, because that's a thing about trauma is that people don't feel safe like in the world or with others. And so to find that sense of inner peace. But, I feel like we should also talk about this in our conversation too, is because there can be such a barrier and also like the possibility of having more harm done by encountering some of the darkness that is present in our profession, right? I mean, the idea of therapy and personal growth work, it sort of has a halo around it right now. Like people are like, yes, therapy. And what also happens, not infrequently in practice, which is very damaging and not okay, is for the average consumer or somebody who's saying like, yes, I want to do this work, will reach out to help for a therapist, and that therapist is maybe not. I mean, who knows what's going on there, but it's not uncommon at all to connect with a professional counselor who is strongly entrenched in a belief system and who wants to do Christian counseling or whatever. And that so some, an unsuspecting person walking in the door is now sitting with, a counselor who is very eager to do Christian counseling because that's what they do. And I know that there is a beautiful space for faith-based counseling. It can be so helpful, but there needs to be consent. It needs to be somebody signing up to do that and seeking out a Christian counselor and having both understanding on both sides of like, this is why we're here. Because I think what happens a lot in practice is that isn't disclosed. And it can happen with Christian counseling. I have also had experiences with therapists who were briefly on our team here at Growing Self, Jennifer, not long, who a client would walk through the door and have anxiety. And this person would be very into, new agey belief systems and be like, you know what, let's do some hypnosis and I'm going to regress you to a past life. And like, oh yes, you were shot by a Nazi firing squad in 1944. And so that is really the source of your anxiety. And so we need to talk about that. I mean, like very weird stuff. It can happen just in so many ways, but there is no regulation around what therapists actually do behind the closed door. And if they want to bring belief systems into it that are meaningful to them, meaning the therapist, they can and they do in a way that is not helpful or productive to somebody who isn't wanting that experience. I mean, it's a real issue. And sorry, I'm officially on a rant now, but I have another a person who going through a terrible experience, a terrible loss, and she has experienced spiritual trauma in her life. And at this time is really, and to feel safe, she needs to be in, situations where there is not an overt kind of spiritual message or expectation. And so in going through this difficult life experience, when she did reach out for help, it was always going into a faith direction with support groups, with counselors. And it feels like she can't get help without having to be re-traumatized, essentially. I mean, and I know that that is not something that you do, and that many, I think, well-trained and ethical people who are counselors and also have a certain faith background won't do any of that. There's a lot of ethics and boundaries that need to be there. But I mean, do you have any thoughts about like why that happens so commonly, or like what people can do about it? Like, is there a way to check it out ahead of time? I don't know.
This is, that is part of researching your therapist, or to really looking into their biography, where they come from, and doing that. But one of the things to really look for when they're doing the assessment, how do they address it? How do they talk about your spiritual life? Like, do they ask you about it? They ask if you want anything included or not. And if they are asking you those questions, you might be blindsided. So it's just really important to have a really good assessment as you're coming into therapy. But also, this goes back to permission. If the therapist starts to go in a direction that feels uncomfortable with you or your belief system, another therapist. You don't need to continue with them. And so many times, and this is where I see it happen a lot, they continue on with that therapist, and then the trauma becomes more and more and more. And they don't even know how to get out of it because they're put into a similar system or cycle that they were in, or even with family members, but now that is re-traumatized with the therapist. And so give yourself permission to not stay with a therapist if it's not a right connection. And to look at their biographies, but one, look more into who they are, but and give them those questions in those first sessions or in a consultation. Ask them very specific questions because it's important. You went through a lot in your life. You have the rights to be respected and for your belief system to be respected, especially in a place that is supposed to be safe. And a therapeutic alliance, our relationship is to be a safe place. And if it does not feel safe, it is not the right place for you. Please go seek someone else out. So that is my greatest advice for them. Just really listen to how they approach things. And if there are particular things that re-trigger you or are traumatic for you, really make sure that you seek out someone who can respect that part of you and help you work through it and not re-trigger you.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Just a very empowering message. And so, going back to those ideas, to summarize, I'd be very careful about who you work with, do your homework, try to learn about their background, hopefully going into it. And you should also not just jump into working with anybody. You should have a consultation meeting where your job as a potential client is to say, so tell me about you, tell me how you work, asking questions to be clear around here's what I want and here's what I don't want, right? And also, I think you were bringing up a great point, is that a true professional counselor will do assessments and will ask about many different life domains, family of origin, relational history, sexual history, also spiritual history, in order to kind of understand who you are and what is important to you before jumping into stuff. And if at any point in the process you feel uncomfortable, you can say that, or you can just stop, and understand that there is also a power hierarchy in helping relationships, that particularly vulnerable people, can need support, and just the message that, yes, you get to be empowered and be in control of this process, and you don't have to do anything with anybody that you don't want to do. So that's really good. Just before I forget, I'll mention, so on our website, growingself.com, we have put together like a ton of just informational resources, things like how to find a therapist, how to vet a therapist, helping people understand, like, here's what evidence-based therapy practices look like. And here are some signs that you might be getting involved with a therapist or a couples counselor who might not be really well equipped to assist you. And so they're all available. And it felt important for me to put that information out there because, you and I know that not all therapy is the same. Not all counselors are the same, and that it's very important to make informed decisions, So, okay. I know we're out of time and I don't want to keep you, but this has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
I really enjoyed talking with Jennifer today, and I hope that you got a lot out of that conversation, particularly if the cultivation of healthy spirituality is something that you are working on. To support you in this growth, you are invited to come into the Emotional Wellness collection of our blog and podcast at growingself.com/blog-podcast. And from there, you'll go into the Happiness collection and find the Emotional Wellness collection, where we have a number of other articles and also podcasts around things like finding meaning, also grief and loss, different expressions of spirituality, but also articles that I think can help you, particularly in that and also in our personal growth collection, help you develop an individuated and authentic idea of who you are and what is important to you that can help you in this exploration process and help you feel confident in your inner direction as you are considering some of these things, perhaps healing from the past, but also as you're moving forward into a new and bright future that is one of your making. I will be back in touch with you next week. Do not forget to tap the subscribe button while we're here now so that you are notified when a new podcast is available for you. And in the meantime, let's all enjoy more of Dan It together with the song Cuatro Vientos. And you can learn more about Dan It, their music, their mission, their upcoming tour dates on their Bandcamp page, rkjvk.bandcamp.com. Thanks, you guys. Be back in touch soon.